Did everybody say hello? What was that again?
All right, and we are live. Welcome to Turkey Chats. We're so glad that you're here and tuning in with us today. My name is Brittany Sweeney. I am the Communications Manager at the Livestock Conservancy, and as you can see, I have a bunch of wonderful guests here with me today. I just want to remind everyone to please leave us a comment or a question. Let us know where you're here and let us know what you want to talk about at the end. A big shout out and thank you to all of our members today. You help make programs like Turkey Chats possible. We're excited that you're here. Jeanette, do you want to introduce everyone and get started with our chat?
Yeah. Today's a particularly special day for me because one of the first projects I ever got involved with the Conservancy was a major turkey project. And I saw all these names associated with the early days of our turkey work with the Conservancy. And, to have all these people together on the same screen is actually quite remarkable. And I wanted to introduce Carolyn Christman, and she formerly of the Livestock Conservancy and one of the authors of Birds of a Feather. And she was part of the early turkey work that started because of the 1997 turkey census that shot up the red flags that turkeys were in trouble. And some remarkable work happened shortly after that. And Marjie Bender, who's also formerly of the Livestock Conservancy and my very first boss at the Conservancy. And she's the one that was had my back through the whole turkey manual and stuff. And there are still a number of turkey people that it brings tears to their eyes when they hear about you. You're very well loved. And of course, Bob Hawes, who also was heavily involved with the Livestock Conservancy and a co-author of Birds of a Feather. And we're just so happy to have all of you guys here. And I thought I'd start off with Carolyn to talk a little bit about how the red flag went up and how you guys started moving towards saving the heritage turkey in America.
I came to the Conservancy in 1987, and I was hired to start the poultry conservation work, which started as a census of chicken breeds. And that took a big shift of attention. And fortunately, we had Roy Crawford at University of Saskatchewan to be kind of the technical guide to how to work on chickens. And the chicken work was big and complicated, and it took a long time. And then we got into a livestock census. And so the turkey work was obviously really important and was going to be a priority, and it kept getting pushed aside because we didn't really know how to start. And then the hero of the story, Bob Hawes, came onto the scene, and he had been a board member, but he actually knew how to work on turkeys. And so it was actually Bob, really the leader, and he had some colleagues at University of Maine, I think, and I worked out of the office, and we did this survey 95, 96, 97, and we looked at the 8 varieties of turkeys recognized by the APA, and we knew that it was going to be a big deal. We knew they were all going to be rare. We knew it was essential to act, but it took a while to get all the pieces on the board. And so Bob really got that piece going. And one advantage of this taking so long to develop is that we really were able to kind of gather a bigger view of why they were so important. And it was a crisis. And so that when we came forward with the Birds of a Feather and the other publications, then we were completely ready to go because we were really confident in the information and we were really confident in the number of people who were our partners. We're a precious few, but precious. And so that's really how it developed. And I think that the census that Bob had led was reported in 97 or 98, and then 99 was the book.
Mm-hmm.
So that was my piece, was to set this up and kind of make sure that we really understood what a big catastrophe it was. And then Bob and I articulated it, and then Marjie came in and did the work. So
Bob, could you talk a little bit about how you were feeling at the time? I know you're very passionate about turkeys, but what was going through your head when you saw that turkeys were literally on the brink? I mean, we were that close to losing them all and just being stuck with commercial birds. What was going through your head?
Well, to tell you the truth, I kind of fell into this. Carolyn, of course, hinted for many years that someone needed to do this census, and hinting to me. And along came, I taught at the time a course called Senior Seminar, and the students had to have a project under some faculty member, and then they would write it up and research it, write it up. And I had a student that needed a project. So I said, how would you like to do a turkey census? And she was a little cool at first, but she warmed up to it. And we had her phone the various hatcheries around the country. And generally she had a positive response. Some were not so positive, but she rolled with that. And then I repeated it a second year, enlarged it, and that was 97, 98. And then, as Carolyn said, the book came out in 99, and so we have the results of the survey in the book. And the thing that we found that was most interesting to me was not so much the actual number of birds, although it was pretty scary how few there were, but it was how few hatcheries were actually keeping them. Many of the hatcheries, not many, but a large number of the hatcheries that were offering poults were actually buying eggs from their neighbor next door, who was also offering the poults from the same flock. So we found in 2 or 3 cases people offering poults that didn't have breeder flocks. They were simply buying hatching eggs. And one thing that we didn't do, we didn't include the individual breeders, because our thought was we wanted people to have these sources of poults, but from people or companies where they could readily ship them. So many of the smaller producers, although they had excellent birds, they weren't in a position to ship eggs or poults. So the following year, when the SPPA did their survey, they had quite larger numbers, although the actual range of the birds was in the same order, but they had larger numbers because they included some of the smaller producers and the fanciers. So.
And then along comes Marjie and that major grant to start the turkey work. Can you talk a little bit about that? And I know I came in just as you had gotten the grant and started the turkey manual, but can you talk a bit about how you took the what Carolyn and Bob worked on and flew with it, so to speak.
Mhm.
Yeah. So there were actually some steps in between. And I think it may have been Phil Spangenberg or one of his colleagues at Virginia Tech that had suggested that we might look into the immune health of the heritage turkeys versus the commercial birds. And so there was a small study that was funded by the Bernice Barber Foundation. And that was the initial kind of look at Virginia Tech of the immunologic health of a couple of different varieties and some commercial birds. So that there was clearly a difference in their kind of overall health and robustness. So from there, we thought we would build upon that. And that's when we reached out to Southern SARE to do some more investigation of that, both to look at it at the university in a research setting, as well as to kind of test those birds in the field. And so we recruited a number of growers and breeders who would be willing to handle the flocks, manage the data, give us information, and try to be consistent about that so that we could gather some reliable data. I think one of the things that I found going forward, and this is true across the species, but was especially true because I was so deep into the turkeys, was there wasn't necessarily a lot of documentation that was considered, it was mostly considered anecdotal information. And so in order for it to move forward in university settings or other locations where you really needed to have a rigorous scientific approach to the information that you were sharing, we needed to be able to start to document that material. And so working through with this grant started to give us that foundation. And the other thing that I started to do is try to discern who, for me, I would be my go-to sources as kind of the reliable information sources. And even though one might consider them still anecdotal, they still were had so much depth of experience in turkey production and in turkey breeding that I felt confident in what I was hearing and being able to share that information. So from there, Bob, you started Snood News. We moved forward with that. And to go back to Birds of a Feather, one of the really critical things that was in Birds of a Feather that Bob and Carolyn produced, it included the census material, but it also included a breed profile for every single one of those breeds. And those were kind of initial and early steps for, okay, so the breeds are rare, the varieties are rare. So what are they? Tell me about their behaviors. What do they look like? How do I get them? Who raises them? What should I be looking for? And so everything seemed to grow incrementally on one more step. So as we kind of got the information and did the immunologic work, almost simultaneously, I think it was, I had a note here, I think it might have been in 2000, it was in 2000, ALBC, then called ALBC, the Livestock Conservancy, had received recognition by Slow Food and had gotten a conservation award from Slow Food. A couple of years later, based on ALBC work at that point, they decided they wanted to have a turkey Thanksgiving Turkey Initiative. So they wanted to put heritage turkeys on people's tables, which was great because it got them into consumers' hands. It started to really develop some momentum. But the challenge was we didn't really have, the hatcheries didn't have as many birds as we might have wanted. The producers didn't necessarily all know what they were doing in terms to create a consistent quality bird and outcome. So I was particularly concerned about the reputation with that big push, what the reputation of these turkeys would be when they landed on somebody's Thanksgiving dinner table. So out of that came more of the research funding that we were requesting from Southern Fare, which included the work that you did, Jeanette, on production, that production manual. How do you raise these birds? How do you make sure that they're consistent? What do you look for when you're starting out with birds in your hands? And then we also did some work helping people understand, really get hands-on experience with selecting breeders, which you've done a fabulous job with other poultry, just moving forward, taking that same model and moving that forward. So those were all just they seem to me to be reasonable next steps in order to make sure that we stayed ahead of the curve as turkey started to gain some real traction in the marketplace.
Mm-hmm. Bob, do you want to talk a little bit about Snood News and what that was all about and what you tried to do with that?
Well, the book was nice, and it was well welcomed, but we thought we needed something that would be a little more timely, that we could keep adding to. And so we went through this, and Carolyn found some money somewhere to pay the postage. And I wrote some of the articles, and she wrote some of the articles, and we started out. And we needed a name for this. So I always like these little titles that rhyme, kind of. So we call it the Snood News, since the turkey is the only animal in the world that I think to have a snood, like there'd be no confusion there with some other species. So yes, and that was quite popular. We sent it out free for a couple of years, I think, and then Carolyn ran out of money, and we charged for it. And we didn't have a great reduction in subscribers. We still had several subscribers. And so we went through all the varieties of the, history of their evolution. And, people seem to enjoy it.
Yeah, I came across all the back issues we've still got in our archives, and my goal, hopefully within the next few weeks, is to get everything digitized and put on our turkey pages, because a lot of people had never heard of that publication, and the information there is still valid. The turkeys are what turkeys are, and
Yes.
So we're hoping to get that up on our website once I can get them all digitized, because they're the only copies we have. So I've got to be very careful about taking the staples out, making sure we don't damage anything.
Oh, I have copies if you.
I have copies.
And there's an interesting article there toward the last of the series that Marjie did with some large whites and bourbon reds, comparing them in terms of growth rate and feed efficiency. And it's one of the few trials that's ever been done with with some of these heritage varieties. Most of the information that we have on these, or especially in the early 90s, was just anecdotal, and Margie had that nice study with the urban reds.
Mhm.
So yes, I think it would be worthwhile to put that up. I was going to charge for it, but you must have more money, so.
Carolyn, can you talk a little bit about, sorry, Margie, you had something you wanted to say?
I wanted to emphasize that the articles that Bob wrote of all of the genetic information on there, I don't think that's found anyplace else. I don't know that is anyplace else. And so there's some material in Snood News that I was so excited to hear that you were planning to digitize that, because it's incredibly useful. So go for it.
We're going to do our best. I was going to ask Carolyn about, developing the networks of people and, the people factor. I mean, I knew that as an organization, the red flag went up and we were concerned. What was it like to connect with the producers back then? And, what did they have to say about the efforts, and how did you reach them?
Well, I wanted to say that the turkey work, as critical and scary as it was the most joyous bit of work I ever did. And it took a while to create itself, but then it just exploded. And so I was sitting there at that old office in the traffic circle at Pittsburgh, and I got this phone call, and it was this man called Frank Reese. And Frank said, "I just heard about you all, and I have all these turkeys, and nobody cares about them. So they said to call you," and I said, "Frank, you have come to the right place, and you are among friends." And that was the beginning of our association with Frank Reese, and that led to more and more people. But what about that? We think about turkeys as, there are a lot of cultural perceptions of turkeys, but I would say that the work on the history of the turkey and its domestication and its variety and its cultivation, and they get stolen by the Spanish and they go across the ocean and they go to England, and then they're around all of Europe at every royal wedding party there is, and then they come back with the Pilgrims. And so this story and the narrative line was a fuel for the conservation, and it was certainly a fuel for me and a motivation. And so you have this species that is really divided between the big one with the plastic deal in its breast, and the real farm birds who are valuable and preserved and loved and useful, but nobody knows. When you say turkey, it's a butterball. And so we had to teach people what the word turkey meant. And there were all these people out there in different places who knew that. And so it was over time that those people came to be together. And I can't say exactly how it happened. We when we set up I think before there was the emergency flag that went up, there was this flag that just said, "We're interested in turkeys. Turkey people welcome here." And they started to show up, and we started to meet them. And Don did a lot of traveling, and Margie and Jeanette and Bob, and went out, and we found our family. We really found the flock. But there is a lot of, for every bit of fear and worry, there's this joy and beauty of this unique species.
Yeah, it was quite extraordinary to see last year at the Ohio National that they had such a turnout for the turkey show, one of the likes that they hadn't seen in decades. And, we had many, many good quality turkeys there. And, we were, the APA was aiming to do another big turkey show this year, but unfortunately, the Ohio National was canceled and made things impossible. But it must make you all really excited to see that they're starting to be slowly a resurgence of the popularity of turkeys. It kind of waned for a little while, and I think because of the excitement through the show world that people are starting to think about turkeys again. They're hard, they're big, they cost a lot to feed. Try keeping them in a fence line is another challenge. And what I guess I'd ask this of all of you. What would you say to the next generation? Why is it important for people to consider turkeys and keep going? And do you have any thoughts on that? Why turkeys? Bob, do you want to start?
Turkeys are pretty efficient animals. If you have the space to let them free range, and you also have a large white dog to chase away the coyotes. But they're a very efficient animal. Everybody likes turkey. What I would like to see is a little more organization, so that there are a few more farms set up with larger numbers of birds. There are a lot of people, and you see them on Facebook, who are keeping turkeys, but to some people, turkeys are turkeys, and it would be nice to have a designated farm for each of these varieties, or something similar to that, to keep these varieties separate, because they are all one breed according to the APA, which really doesn't make sense. But in Europe, each color is a breed, but we have all turkeys under one breed, and the colors are varieties. But each of them has a little, have some different traits, and it's important to keep these traits going and to keep them separated, and not to, end up with just one big amalgamated colored turkey population.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And what about you, Marjie? What would you say to the next generation? Why get excited about turkeys?
I think that people fall in love with a species. I think that it's hard to predict what folks are going to fall in love with, and so exposure of folks who might be interested, of the next generation who might be interested in having a flock or a herd of something on their property, and participating in some real way towards conservation, I think should just go out and get exposure. And so I think part of that is the great work that the Livestock Conservancy is doing, is giving people access during non-COVID times, giving people access to being able to experience different species, and saying, one, that interaction and going, oh, I think I could fall in love with these. And I think that this is a project that I could undertake in a real way. I also think that turkeys as poultry are a pretty straightforward species. They're bigger than chickens. They're generally quieter than ducks and geese. They don't lay nearly as many eggs, so you don't necessarily have to gather them as often as chickens. Harvest is maybe once a year, so it's pretty straightforward. And you can participate in conservation by purchasing from a breeding hatchery and growing them yourselves on a yearly basis. You don't necessarily have to invest all the way into being a breeder. And that still contributes significantly to the conservation efforts.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. I'll tell you, one of my fondest memories of turkeys with you is, I don't know if you remember the Christmas parade that we did in Pittsburgh, and I had that big tom turkey on my lap, and you and the kids had chickens, and I remember the faces on the road, and people literally screaming, "Oh my God, it's a turkey! Is that alive?" And people were so excited that they'd never seen a live turkey before. And he was so good. He managed to behave himself almost to the end of the parade. And then he just got to one point where he's like, "Okay, I'm done." He wanted off my lap. But that is just one of my fondest memories. And Carolyn, what are your thoughts? You certainly expressed it was some of the most joyous work you've ever done. What do you tell the next generation that maybe's never experienced that kind of joy? What do you say to them?
I think that every bit of conservation comes from love, falling in love with turkeys or chickens or horses. And so look at everything and find something to love. And we really hope that you look hard at turkeys and look at turkeys first in case that's your love match. But be honest and find something that you love, because we all do best in that kind of a relationship. And turkeys are very lovable. They really are. And so I think that this is, this is globally unique work that the Livestock Conservancy is doing. And it's important and it's fun. So try it out.
Well, great. Brittany, are there any questions that have come up through this that we might be able to answer?
We do have lots of questions. People are very excited that everyone's here today.
I think she's working on it.
Whitney says, "Hi guys." Hi Whitney. Thanks for tuning in today and talking about turkeys. McMurray Hatchery says they're happy to catch Turkey Chats live. Thanks for being with us today. Morgan Lyon says good morning. Good morning, Morgan. Teresa says, important for people to know how close we were to losing heritage turkeys. We're also on the brink with other species. It's hard being a keeper of heritage breeds.
Yes, it is.
Well, thank you for your important work, Teresa. We're glad that you are raising heritage turkeys. Don Bixby says, wonderful to recall this valuable conservation history with old friends. Thanks for tuning in with us today, Don.
Hey, Don.
Anna wants to know if there are any heritage turkeys handy to put on view. We don't have any live turkeys today, but that is a great question.
I would refer you to the Livestock Conservancy's website, where there's some great photos of the different varieties.
Absolutely. Our website, the turkey section, has a picture of every turkey to go with those wonderful breed profiles that y'all worked on.
The other source is Porter's Hatchery in Indiana. I'm sure you know that. I think he has now over 50 different color varieties. Not all of them breed true, but you can, if you want some just for the, for the backyard, he has a terrific range. And it's interesting. It gives you the genotype of each color pattern. It's quite a resource on his website.
sounds like a wonderful resource. Thank you, Anna. McMurray Hatchery wants to know, can you share some of your thoughts on what others, your typical small flock owners, hobby farmers, and homesteaders can do to help preserve rare breeds? They're seeing a lot of interest in heritage varieties, and many want to raise more sustainable flocks than hybrids. So do you have any advice for people?
Well, I can weigh in that. Oh, okay, Bob, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Simply buying poults is one way, and as Margie mentioned, people don't have to keep breeder flocks. There's quite an assortment now of hatcheries and varieties, that you can just purchase off the shelf, and this is a way to help maintain the varieties, because this helps maintain the breeder flocks. People keeping these flocks need to have sales of eggs and poults in order to maintain the parent flocks. So simply buying poults is one way to do this, even if you market them all in the fall.
Exactly.
And I think for breeders, it's also, if you want to take the leap and become a breeder, get yourself a copy of the American Poultry Association Standard of Perfection. That one of the most important things you can do as a breeder is to keep to that standard. And, the standard will tell you what color, the skin is, or the feathers, the eyes, the size of the bird. That's really your poultry Bible when it comes to understanding what a bird should look like. And some of the color varieties are more challenging than others, but it's a really important resource. And I'd also say that if you're thinking of getting into turkeys, on our turkey pages, we do have free for download our Heritage Turkey Manual for raising them for the holidays. And then if you want to dive deeper, we have the Heritage Turkey Breeding Manual, and that will go over some of the points beyond the standard that you're looking for in a good quality turkey. So, I think Bob had mentioned that earlier, is, one of the challenges is finding quality birds, because, just about anybody can breed a turkey, but it's a rare gift to breed a good turkey. So
That is very true. Linda Blackman says, buy your book. It's a great reference. So thank you, Linda, for that wonderful plug. I'm glad to hear that you found Birds of a Feather very helpful.
She's a friend, that's why she's saying that.
That's okay. Let's see. Linda says she's found that turkeys make great pets. They're protective of their flock, no matter what it consists of, and turkey hens are great broodies and moms. Hers hatched, raised some rare European Peking ducks this past year, and she was unsuccessful to raise them any other way. So turkeys have lots of jobs. Ben wants to know, can you talk about the risk of running turkeys with chickens at a homestead? He read a lot about blackhead disease and he's very fearful.
Bob, can you talk to that?
Well, it's definitely a risk, and if you have any other way to get around it, I wouldn't do it. But every time I put that on Facebook, 3 different people will chime in and say, oh, I do it all the time, no problem. Well, maybe they do, but there's a lot of people where they may just lose birds quietly and nobody gets too excited about it. But definitely there is a risk to run turkeys over ground that chickens have been on. And you see these yards sometimes at all four species together, ducks, geese, turkeys, and chickens all running, drinking out of the same water that the ducks have just defecated in. And I wouldn't, if you have any other source of or area where you can keep the turkeys separate, I would certainly do it.
I don't remember at this point. I remember when I looking into the life cycle of the protozoa for blackhead, and that memory has faded a lot. But there is a period of time that you need, and I think it's fairly lengthy, that before you rotate turkeys back onto ground that chickens has been on. Do you recall what that is? Is it 3 years? Is it 7 years?
I was going to say 2 years, but
2 years. Okay. You'd know better than me.
I'm not sure.
But it's a couple years with no chickens on it before it's safer for the turkeys to come back onto that property, on that land.
Yes.
Great question, and thank you for those.
Yeah, I think it's also introducing the turkeys slowly onto the ground. Baby turkeys are fairly delicate up until they're about 8 weeks old. And so trying to keep them up off the ground until at least that age when their immune systems have started kicking in. And, it's less of as they grow older, they'll be, better able to withstand an infection. But paying attention to the turkeys really has a lot to do with it. Looking at their poop every day, and you can tell when the turkey's starting to have a problem. And Zane Graham a couple of weeks ago was talking about that yellowy, mustardy stool that was one of the indicators that there's a problem. And so I think being vigilant with your animals can go a long way.
Right. Great question, Ben. Thank you. Let's see. Beth says she raises white meat turkeys for Thanksgiving, but would love to get into heritage breeds. What, if any, special care do they require? And is it beneficial to buy for a hobby farm? Let's see. That's purchased as from big hatcheries, or should they be looking to support other small farms?
Can you leave that?
I can start.
Say
Who
what?
wants to answer?
Yeah,
I
I
was
can.
wondering if you could leave the question up. Yeah.
Sorry.
Go
It's
ahead.
just cutting off
Go ahead,
Jeanette.
Carolyn.
I can start with that. There is a contribution that people can make just by raising turkeys 1 season, 2 seasons, 3 seasons, buying from the big sellers, buying from anybody, because there's such a lack of information and exposure to pasture-raised turkeys, historic turkeys, beautiful turkeys. And so this goes back to the McMurray question, which is support the market in some way that is appropriate for your farm. And if that is buying 12 and just learning about them a year and then selling them and sharing your results with your extension agent, with your teenagers' friends, with the Christmas parade group, with just getting turkeys out there in a variety of settings does something. And so I would say it's hard to overstate the fact that heritage turkeys and pasture turkeys and hobby farm turkeys are not documented, and people don't know how to do it, and they're just inventing things that fit with their own situation. And so whatever feels right to you is a contribution, and whatever efforts you make and what you learn, share what you learn. And if it's if it works, that's useful. If you know why it doesn't work, that's useful. But we're still building this knowledge infrastructure on these varieties, on turkeys, and how they fit in small scale farming. And are they market, can you make money on them? Or is it a charity project? So really, any interest in turkeys that is expressed in any way is helpful, in my opinion.
The resources that came up, that were developed in the kind of early to mid 2000s too, that Jeanette referenced, which was the manual on how to produce heritage turkeys on pasture, which I guess is on the website for free. And then the next step, if you want to be a breeder, is that breeding manual, which kind of helps walk you through the selection process when you're looking for the actual physical traits and how to put your hands around that bird to kind of feel for some of those physical traits. So those two resources are really valuable. I'd lay my hands on those and print them out and mark them up and get some birds from one of the big hatcheries and try your hand at them, and you may well find that there's one of the varieties that you really like better than the other because they appeal to your eye, or because of the way they behave, or because of the way they dress out. All of those are good reasons to make a selection, but the only way to do that is by having some experience. And you're not going to hurt the breed, you're not going to hurt the variety by dabbling in over the coming several seasons. You are not going to do any damage.
Great. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Beth. That was a great question. Let's see. Ginger says, can you speak to the importance of raising turkeys to meet breed functionality and not just for show or visually to standard? I think many get hung up on how they should look and lose the important part of a breed, which is its heritage use.
So one of the things that we did when we defined heritage turkey was to really talk a lot about functionality, and that was, the ability to breed naturally. I can't remember all the details off the top of my head. What is it, Jeanette? What's our definition? Natural breeding.
Huh? Oh,
you're not paying attention.
They can thrive outdoors and
thriving out there, long, slow growth rate, long productive lifespan. So you start to choose those kinds of things as you're looking for those breeder birds. As Frank Reese would say, that if you actually selected to the whole standard, you'd be selecting for functionality. Because you have to read more than just, there's a lot of language around the feather color because there's so much detail there and it's so complicated. But if you read the whole standard, you'll get a lot about functionality that's critical. So breed to the whole standard, not just to the feather color.
Thank you. Thank you, Ginger. See, I think we've got a couple more. Linda wants to know, what are possible risks if heritage turkeys intermingle or exposed to wild turkeys besides crossbreeding?
Well, there are some diseases that they can pick up from the wild turkeys. Crossbreeding, unless you're keeping a really pure flock, might be a blessing in disguise. You get a lot of hybrid vigor. And actually, that's what happened when the first turkeys came over from England. The British were quite surprised to see turkeys waiting for them, on the dock when they arrived. But crossing those British turkeys with eastern wild subspecies, I think, is partly what's made our current standard bronze turkey as vigorous as it is. It's got a nice mixture of genes there. But I know people who have wild turkeys that come in and mate with the domesticated females, and as I say, you can always fix it the next generation. Those are the ones that make good Thanksgiving candidates.
I think the biggest risk, though, is in certain parts of the country there are diseases that certainly could be transmitted from the wild turkeys, and that's probably one of the greatest risks. And in talking with Zane a couple of weeks ago, he was saying the biggest problems that he has is that sometimes those wild toms will entice the hens to go with them, and he doesn't have any problems letting his toms wander, but the girls will take off if they're allowed to intermingle with the wild turkeys, and so that could be a problem too.
You definitely don't want to lose your birds. Let's see. I think we've got one more question. Ben says, can you talk more about turkeys as flock protectors? If we get turkeys, they would be pets, mascots, since they don't process their birds. He wants to justify adding turkeys to his small farm.
He's convincing someone else in the family.
You can always use them as feather producers. So there's a small market for the tail feathers and the wing feathers. But I wouldn't plan on them as flock. Go ahead. I wouldn't plan on them as flock protectors. I think the fox can pick off a turkey pretty easily.
What were you going to say, Jeanette?
I was going to say most predators find turkeys yummy. So it would have to be a fairly small predator. I think that, they might scare off a Cooper's hawk or something like that. But to my knowledge, turkeys are pretty vulnerable to most predators. Even like teeny tiny minks have been known to kill them.
Well, Ben, we can say you can raise turkeys to save them. It's a conservation effort if you really need a reason. Good question. I think a couple more have come in if you've got time. In addition to Frank Reese, who were some of the breeders who played a pivotal role in the early days of this project? Are they still raising turkeys?
Glenn Drowns comes immediately to mind. Karen Thornton was, on a smaller scale, was a partner in crime on that front. Gerald Donnelly, who I think you recently visited, didn't you, Jeanette?
Yeah. He had mostly geese and ducks and chickens.
I ran across, just in kind of getting my head back around some of this information, I ran across an email from Gerald Donnelly that I had. So he, at that point, was involved in turkey conservation. There was a gentleman down in Texas who was a longtime breeder that Frank Reese was in close contact with. And I don't recall his name. He wasn't really in touch with the Livestock Conservancy, but he was an important breeder and a generation older than Frank.
The other person was, I can't think of her name, the woman who did the census.
Paula Johnson.
Paula Johnson, yes.
Yes.
I don't think she keeps turkeys now, but
Yeah.
she had
No.
a very good setup.
Yes.
Yeah, Paula actually was at the Ohio National last year and was so excited to see all the turkeys. And it was great to finally meet her because I remember her name coming up in so many resources. And she's still around, and but she does not have turkeys anymore.
Right.
I think that we have to call out to the hatcheries as well, because they were and continue to be pivotal breeders. I remember Cackle Hatchery. I visited them. I think they're in New Mexico. But I'm not remembering others off the top of my head. There weren't a lot of hatcheries who were actually leading breeding flocks, but they're important in the whole conservation question.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and we have a list of hatcheries on our website, so people could reference that over there.
Thanks, Allison.
Is that it for questions, Brittany?
I think this is the last one. Angie wanted to know if there are any tips for how to free range turkeys.
I would refer her again to the manual that's on the website, because that's pretty comprehensive. Jeanette with me at her back, and I don't know if that was me on her back or at her back, is a really quite a comprehensive document. So it's not just a document; it's a book. So find it and read it. It'll help you a lot.
Perfect. Thank you, Angie, and thanks to everyone for asking such great questions today. We appreciate that. And thanks to everyone for joining us today for this wonderful chat. We've learned so many wonderful things. Is there any final comments that anybody wants to make?
I'm just so
Go ahead, Jeanette.
I just wanted to say how thankful I am that all three of you came on the show. You really are legends in your own right within our organization, and we're all part of a success story that sometimes we don't shout from the top of the hills, and you guys really made a difference, and it's nice to hear how much joy the work had brought all of you, it seems. And thank you so much for coming on. It's been a rare treat.
Thank you for having us.
And it's been delightful. It's been absolutely delightful to see Carolyn and Bob again. It's been a long time since we've seen you, and I all hugs around.
Well, I'm just so excited that Livestock Conservancy is in such great hands right now. And so thank y'all for carrying it forward.
Yes. It's nice to keep up with the times.
Yeah. Well, thank you all. And Brittany, do you have any closing housekeeping you need to do?
Tune in again next week. We will be back again with another turkey edition, and then we're going to celebrate geese in December. So we hope more people will stick around for that as well. Have a wonderful week, and it was great to see everybody.
Bye.
Bye.